So I kindly ask everyone to seat because we are starting our last talk. The title is Taking Care of an Archaeological Site, Site Management in the 21st Century. I leave the field to our chairman, Cédric Gobeil. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fede. Thank you. Do you hear me? Yes? Yeah? No? Oh, oh yes, now. Good. All right. So, good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to our guests for the last panel of today. So, as you see, the topic of this last panel will be the site management of an archaeological site. I heard so much, well, so many times in my very little career, archaeology is destruction, and we keep saying it all the time. And as such, yes, archaeology is destruction, but archaeology can also be preservation and restoration. And as such, I wanted to have a panel today about that. And this is why also we decided to invite a few specialists to speak and to share about their experiences about this topic. Because, you know, when we do archaeology, I've been doing this for just a little bit less than 2 decades now. Archaeological site management is of critical importance for the present activities, but also for the future activities that we're carrying on site. And since Museo Egizio is carrying still then excavation in Egypt. Then I wanted then to share this and to make an emphasizing this topic. Because obviously this management involves critical decisions, and who's deciding to do what and when and what not to do as well. So these are all topics that will be covered today. But first of all, I would like to introduce tonight, well, this afternoon, the panelists that will be discussing and sharing their experience with us today. So the order I chose, you will see it's partly alphabetical, and then I kept the cherry on the top for the last. So Paola Davoli is professor of Egyptology at the University of Salento, Lecce. She is director of the Sokno Payou Nessos project in the Fayoum. And she is also, she was former the director of the New York University Archaeological Mission in Amaida, in the Dakhla Oasis. Then Ray Johnson is Egyptologist and the former director of the Epigraphic Survey of the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago, now renamed the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures, and is currently a visiting scholar at Museo Egizio. Then Diana Craig-Spatch. She's the Lila Axon Wallace Curator in charge of the Department of Egyptian Art at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York. She's also project co-director of the Joint Expedition to Malgata and field consultant to the Metropolitan Museum's Egyptian excavations at Dashur. Then Martin Sählhof is a senior research fellow at the German Archaeological Institute in Cairo and also project director for the Elephantine Archaeological Mission. And last but not least, Massimo Osanna is professor of classical archaeology at the University of Naples, Federico II, and is director general of museums at the Ministry of Culture. So I would like to ask individually, then then one after the other, to share with us a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation that I ask you to do, just to show a little bit of the site management project, either you've been carrying or that you're still carrying in Egypt. So please, Paola.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Just trying to... Next.
It's not working?
Not working.
And if you...
Try back. Thank you. So I'm dealing with mainly with sites in the Western Desert, in the Fayoum and in Dakhla oasis. And I will briefly present two sites or two areas with local threats and possible solutions to these threats. In my opinion, site management means consolidation, restoration, of course, preservation for the next generations, documentation, scientific documentation, and presentation to the public. That means the tourists or visitors. And, but site management must take into consideration the different areas where the sites are and the different threats that are in these areas. As to, for example, the environment and the touristic flows, these are the two main topics that we have to deal with. And in the case of the oasis, the sites are not in the main touristic path. And because of this, they are not considered as potential attraction for travel agencies. And so it means that nowadays they are not in the development projects of the Egyptian ministry. These kinds of sites cannot stand high flows of tourists or visitors for their fragile nature, as we were speaking before, being built basically in mud bricks, and mud is the main material. So threats are natural, such as erosion, as you can see here, some collapses, and deposition of sand. And these conditions it's not going. Let's try. No.
No.
It's not my fault.
Oops. If I try it. So then you need to go
no,
back.
We have to go back.
I want to try.
Okay.
Okay, go back. All right. Thank you. And yes, so erosion, as I was saying, but also deposition of sand, because these places are in the oasis at the edge of the deserts, and the presence of sand around is the main environment of these archaeological sites. And so, for example, in this case of Dakhla Oasis, you have to deal with flows of chain of dunes. And the dunes means movement of sand with the wind. So the wind is for the erosion, but at the same time, it brings sand that try to cover the sites and the buildings. At the same time, as we have seen, and probably we'll see later in Ameida Trimitis in Dakhla Oasis, the flows of sand sometimes cover, but sometimes also move and create or display new areas of the city. And, but we have also to deal with artificial and anthropic actions that modify quite quickly the environment, such as, for example, on the edge of the Fayoum. Here you can see Tebtunis in the two different, in between 10 years, 2004, 2025, you can see that the new land reclamation is surrounding the sites, bringing more water, so that means humidity, and also cultivation, but mainly people, and people means actions all around the sites. And also people means that they have to move around. So for example, in the Fayoum, we have to deal with new roads built in the desert north of Lake Karun and quite close to Dime. And as you can see, there was a plan to build a new resort quite close to Dime. And this would have been very, very dangerous for the conservation of the area and of our sites. It didn't go ahead because of the revolution of 2011. And again, you can see that the anthropic action, and especially the growing of the population, ask for more space in which to build the houses. And this happened in Mut, for example, in the capital of Dakhla Oasis, where the main medieval city was taken down in the last few years. In Almeida, you can see that Almeida is in the desert of Dakhla, and we were asked to protect the area against the cattle and the people who are crossing every day from the village towards the fields. And so the New York University mission, which was directed by Roger Bagnall, decided were asked to build a fence, iron fence, all around the site. But of course, this didn't work at all. Then we have to deal with looting, but looting or spoliation of sites is very ancient action. You can see that in the past, some of these blocks that comes from, you will see from the temple in Almeida, were used to build Ottoman houses. But the lootings of nowadays continues also in archaeological sites. Here are only few of the illegal excavation we could observe in these years in Soknopaionesos, but I'm sure there were many, many more, because during the years people is going to find treasures. So looting of these days are to find treasure, and they are very, very dangerous for the survival of the sites and of the building. Climate change is another topic that we have to deal with for site management. Here you can see the regional road very close to Dime, but also the formation of new lakes because of the rainfalls. And this lake lasted for 3 months, and nowadays we have still humidity all around the site, and as you can see from these wild vegetations. What can we do as site management? We can see two different approaches in Almeida Trimitis, because every place needs to be treated in a different way. So Almeida was built on dunes and is covered by dunes, and this is probably the main thread until today, because it's quite close to the oasis, quite close to the villages, but it was not so looted as it was in the Fayum, for example, archaeological places. The temple area, we found it like this. So the temples were built since at least the 19th dynasty until the Roman period, so probably one building or many buildings reused, so the blocks reused, and we had to deal with these blocks. We found, we didn't find any walls intact, but only hundreds of blocks. And these blocks were rearranged by Olaf Kapper in this sort of magazine, which is in front at the entrance of the site. So this is the so-called block house, where we were planning to display the blocks for the tourists. At that time, from 2005 and until 2011, there was a big hope in this area for touristic opening. And so many resorts, several hotels were going to build, but suddenly they stopped. And this is a replica. The replica of the House of Serenos, this is the original one, so going back to the original and the replication of the places. But this house is quite well preserved, up to 3 meters in height, and some of the rooms are painted. So the problem was how to open this to the tourists, because the paintings are quite unique in Egypt. But the decision, after consulting conservators, for example, from the States, suggested to cover this house, to cover back, so to backfill with clean sand to protect these paintings. I wouldn't do that from Italian perspective. I would have detached these paintings to bring them in the replica to show the visitors the original ones and not the replicated paintings, as you can see here. But in the ethical means of the states, of the Americans, this was not anymore possible. And so we left the originals in place, but I don't think they will last for hundreds of years. Yes, I think so. So they decided to have this replica. We can go ahead. So the replica became a visitor center. So it is close to the blockhouse and at the beginning, at the entrance of the site. So you can have an overview of the sites of the building itself, and both inside and on the roof. So from the roof you can have quite very good view of the ancient Trimitis, and to have more in detail explanation, we prepare these handle pads to go around and see the explanation of the paintings. In Dimes Seba or Sokno so we did something different as site management. The place is quite well preserved. It is completely in the desert. It's not surrounded so far by any village or cultivation. And the main buildings or monuments are the dromos and the temple area. The temple area, we decided to dig inside the temenos because no excavation, scientific excavation were done before. But we have many texts, many papyri in Greek and Demotic, who are dealing with the temple and the gods, which was, of course, who was Sognopaios. And as you can see, we have a series of temples, one behind the other, and the first one is in very bad condition. It is built in a Ptolemaic period, and it was about to collapse. So thanks to a grant of 3 years from RC, we could consolidate all these buildings. So we finished just 1 month ago to consolidate, and now we can dig scientifically inside the temple, and also people can enter without any problems. It can be visited very in safety condition. Apart from this, so you can see some phases of this consolidation. We were using only local stones, only mud, no chemicals to do this. And of course, this is done to preserve this building, but also we are trying to preserve also these high walls, which are the temenos of the sacred area. And these are in mud brick. And the erosion, as you can see at the base, is very dangerous for their collapse. So we were also building in mud bricks, reconstructing the base to sustain these very high walls, which in some cases reach 15 meters high. The next. So reconstruction, real or virtual. As you can see, as you have seen in Almeida, we are doing both, the virtual reconstruction and the real reconstruction with the replica. But what I would like to say is that in both cases, you have to deal with a very good documentation and scientific excavation. So our representation of the buildings we were replicating in virtual or in reality should be really close to the real ones. But of course, because of the fragility of these buildings, visitors cannot enter without destroying them. So we prefer to have both of them. These ones can be published in volumes, as I did in the case of Sereno's house. And also we can propose reconstruction of what we have found, which is not always the case for the real replica. And again, you can also try to show people how they were living inside these buildings, but also how the guest, for example, in this dining room on the Stibadium, can have look at the different walls and the different decorations, scenes that are classical scenes from classical so you can see again the replica of Sereno's house. This is the main hall, which was a banquet hall. And also, this was for us very, very interesting because we could understand the difficulties of the building of this kind of vaults and dome, and also the technique of the different phases of the decorations, which are quite interesting. The other things very interesting for archaeologists is that replicating in a scientific way an object, let's say like this, you can have a better idea of how many mud bricks were used, and also entering after the reconstruction, you can have an idea of the light that was the real light inside these houses, which is not easy to understand. In Dime, instead, we couldn't rebuild the temple because the temple is demolished up to 1.5 meters. And so we couldn't, of course, reconstruct it in reality as the local inspectorate is asking to us, but it will be a fake, of course, because we don't know what was on top of the first floor.
Indeed, yes.
And so our option was only to replicate in virtual reality. And we had a very nice, very good example, because in Kaskarun we have the same temple built in the same way. And so we could, with our data and the preserved temple, we can have a good idea. And so using the three-dimensional technique of photography, we could also reconstruct parts of the temple which has been destroyed, but these reconstructions are only made on scientific basis. This, I think, is quite important. The last step is how to present everything to the public. So visitors are not many, but because of the new roads, they increase year by year. So we wanted to build a display room, but very simple room with only local materials. It's a shelter, as we like to mention. And inside we have a few panels, but the last one, thanks. We also prepare for the presentation of the site a printed guide, which is also available, downloading it on site, on the smartphone, in 3 languages. So people can choose the language, not to have to download all the guides, and go around and see the description of the real buildings, and contemporary see on the phone the reconstruction, the virtual reconstruction.
Thank you, Paola. Thank you very much. Amazing work. Thanks a lot. I cannot but wonder the Fayum, what you've done in the Fayum, since I've seen Almeida, so I just can't but imagine. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Ray, please.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Let's see if I can make this work.
Hopefully. There you go.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to give a shout out to the epigraphic survey, which also turned 100 years old on practically the same week that the Museo turned 200. So happy birthday to everyone. Now, the epigraphic survey based at Chicago House in Luxor is primarily focused on continuing the scientific documentation of the ancient monuments in the Luxor area. And 2 of our primary documentation sites have been Medinet Habu for 100 years and Luxor Temple for, goodness, almost 50. So our primary work has been documentation, but as conditions have changed in Egypt, really starting in a big way in the mid-90s, we've also added site management to our program. As the weather has changed, as the population has exploded, as irrigation has increased, groundwater has become a huge problem. This was dealt with by Egypt and Sweden and the United States. They combined forces for a dewatering programs for both sides of the river in Luxor. These were activated in 2006 and 2012 and have been wildly successful. We have raised additional money to help with the smaller conservation, smaller quote unquote, conservation projects and site management projects for both temples. So Luxor Temple first. Signage. There was never any signage at Luxor Temple. So our architect, artist Jay Heidel put together using AutoCAD orientation panels for the entire temple, starting with one that we set up at the entryway, outside and inside, and then a whole series of them through the temple that essentially showed people where they were, informed the visitor. We have lots of visitors at Luxor and Medinet Habu, so we had a whole set of different problems from the oases. In addition to the temple, part of our concession is also the blockyard areas around the temple, and this has been a specialty of mine for the last 40 years. You can see that, looking at the temple, Luxor Temple from the back, that major sections of the roofing and sidewalls were quarried in antiquity for reuse. And many medieval structures were excavated around the temple during the last 100 years, and whenever decorated stone fragments from the temple or from elsewhere were found, they were stacked around the temple on the bare ground. We inherited this, and starting in the late 70s, we systematically raised everything off the wet ground, which was destroying it, and I organized it by category. We started a conservation program, and of course, we also had to then do collections management. So Jay put together a database for the 50,000 plus fragments, and so there's an interesting tie-in now with the blockyard, which used to be off limits to the public for its safety, for its protection. As tourism has exploded in Egypt, the congestion has become a real issue in both Luxor Temple and Medinet Habu. And those of you who have visited Luxor Temple know that tour groups will go right down the main axis all the way to the back of the temple, to the very back where it's really quite constricted. And then they would all come out again. What we've done is we instituted a link to the blockyard and created an open-air museum that will alleviate the crowds in the back. They will come out to the east and follow a series of walkways where we have reassembled groups of fragments that I've analyzed in my years working with the blockyard. We've arranged everything chronologically, so as the visitor walks out of the temple along the outside of the temple on the east, they're actually becoming informed about the history of the different styles, the history of the temple represented by the different kings and their styles throughout the temple. So, and again, arranged chronologically, so you can see Egyptian art change through time. And what we've done is we have restored fragment groups that are missing pieces by inserting them into a brick matrix, which allows additional material to be inserted later. It's also protects the fragmentary material, and then the bricks are covered with a plaster on which I have done very, very simple reconstruction drawing. So it goes all the way through Egyptian history into the medieval period. It ends with a section where there's a viewing area of the Great Colonnade Hall, which is really quite photogenic, and a display that shows archaeological material found during the dewatering program around Luxor Temple. And then we also installed lights because the temple stays open until 9 o'clock every evening, and now one can visit at nighttime as well. And actually you can see details that are not visible during the day. The end result of our fragment program, whenever possible, is reconstruction, because while the fragments are interesting as fragments, they really begin to sing when you put them together. And we have a couple of places in the temple where we could rejoin fragment groups to the wall. And in this case, in the Colonnade Hall, putting this fragment group together where it originally came from actually helped stabilize a wall that was partially quarried in the past and unstable now. And it happens that the fragment group was located at the very base of this wall section and now acts as a buttress and actually stabilizes that wall. And again, it's the sandstone fragments are inserted into a brick matrix, which means that when future fragments are found, they can be inserted very easily. Another section of the temple on the east side of the Sun Court of Amenhotep III, also we had 111 fragments there that we put back in place. And the fun part of my job was actually doing the physical painting of the missing bits, because that's what I like to do. So this is what it looks like now, and we created on the back side of the wall, we covered the brick matrix with sandstone slabs that imitate the unfinished nature of the blocks in that part of the temple, trying to be sensitive to the look of the temple. Now, taking care of Medinat Habu, again, we've been working there for 100 years, slowly publishing all of the inscribed walls there. It's like a sort of condensed Karnak, where all of the stone elements of the complex survive to the present day. We also have a block yard there. Back in 2007, the ministry asked us to consolidate all the fragmentary material in the area and create a new block yard, which we did, out of the way of the visitors. And you can see Julia Schmid coordinated the database. We moved about 4,000 fragments in 3 seasons, and that has been ongoing since then. You might notice in the middle bottom there, one of our staff members in 2010, actually between 2006 and 2010, Christian Greco, was helping to create this new storage facility. We still miss you out there, Christian. So in the end, we ended up covering part of the block yard, which we were not able to do in Luxor because it's so much smaller here. And now this material is safe and ready for documentation. Reconstruction, we only do when we have to. And there were elements of the complex, 3 gates in particular, that corrosive groundwater salts had so weakened the foundations of these structures, they literally were starting to bow and were threatening with collapse. We generally do not do restoration work, but we raised money and we hired stone teams and trained local stone workers in the restoration of these 3 gates. The Domitian Gate was the first one we attempted because it looked so horrible we were afraid it was going to collapse instantly. You can see the bottom on the left, the lower courses are just literally turning to sand. So it took several seasons to document it fully, consolidate the blocks before dismantling, and then the physical dismantling themselves. We created a damp-coursed, reinforced concrete platform to rebuild the blocks on. We did further consolidation of the blocks in a holding area nearby, and then slowly restored the structure so that by 2017, it was back in place. And of course, educational signage goes with all of this. The second gate, the Gate of Claudius, which is located outside the Medinat Habu complex, but still within our concession, marked the road of Mantu Raharakte that went straight through Amenhotep III's palace area, the Birkat Habu, and all the way to Armant. And it's one of the few monuments of Claudius, Emperor Claudius in the area. So this looked like, again, we just had to dismantle it. So again, dismantled, we've created new foundations for it. It was only put back last year. The finishing of one side of it is happening now. The current director of the Epigraphic Survey, because I've retired 2 years now, Brett McLean, has found a couple more blocks from the other side of the gate, which will be integrated into the reconstruction in the next few seasons. And they might even restore part of the road, which would be really cool, because there are very few roads that survive. And then the last gate that had to be completely dismantled. And I talked to our structural engineer. I said, do we have to dismantle the whole thing? Because it's the bottom courses that are, can't we just figure out a way to support them? But no, the whole thing had to come down. So that is actually underway now from the 25th dynasty. Oops, let me go back. And the physical reconstruction should be finished hopefully in 2025. So this is something we don't didn't want to do, but we felt we had to do, otherwise there would be collapse and possible harm to anyone walking in the area. So the last thing I'm going to discuss, because Medina Habu complex is so huge, and we have been focused primarily on the stone elements, there was a gigantic administrative and residential area around the stone mortuary temple of the king that we excavated back in the 20s, but has largely been undeveloped. Now, like Luxor Temple, most tour groups and visitors will go straight down the main axis and straight out again. But there are reliefs all around the outside of the temple that are quite amazing, battle narratives that are just unique in Egyptian art. And people were walking around, and this is what the back area looked like until a few years ago. Mostly crumbling sandstone slabs. There was a walkway all around the temple that was bordered by a large mud brick wall from the time of Ramses III. So in order to create a safe environment for the visitor and also protect the undeveloped parts of the temple, we decided to reconstruct the paving all around the temple and match the paving stones with sandstone that we quarried specially for that purpose. And then the idea was also to cap the foundations of the completely quarried away mud brick walls and not restore the mud brick wall all the way to its original, 14-meter height, but create a balustrade that would guide visitors, as you can see from the lower right photograph, guide visitors along the walkway. We want them to see parts of the temple, but we don't want them to access the parts of the temple that are so fragile or undeveloped that just walking over them would damage them. So this was the first increment that we finished on the south side of the temple, where most of the original paving was missing. And as it was interesting because as soon as we took down the barriers, there was a tour group on it. It was absolutely, totally successful. And most tour groups do mind the borders. They stay away from the undeveloped area. The west side and the north sides were finished just this year. And so that project, which is one of the biggest during my time as director there, is now finished. And I'm just incredibly happy with what we've been able to do. Matching the original style of the architecture, we've been very sensitive to that. Not putting in tiles that were so thin they break as soon as you walk on them. Respecting the fabric of the original temple, but making a safe, secure, and beautiful environment for the visitor. So that's some of what we've been doing.
Just some. Well, thank you very much, Ray. I didn't know you were the one who draw the drawings at the Luxor Temple.
I started out as an artist at Chicago as well. I was writing my dissertation, so it's fun to get back to that.
Congratulations, what amazing. Well, next time I go, I will make sure then to have a look at all of them. Diana.
Who would like to press the button for me? Because, thank
well.
you, because I guarantee one of them is going to end up on the floor.
No.
I'm very grateful to my two colleagues for laying the groundwork for so much that I don't even have to talk about. I just would like to share some things that we've done at Dashur and Melgata. I have to acknowledge that the work at Melgata...
With your mic.
The work at Melgata was heavily supported. I was supported by Catherine Rarig in a lot of what you see. And Dashur, of course, is under the directorship of Adela Oppenheim and Dieter Arnold. I have worked there, but it is what you're going to see is Adela's material. But they've done some very interesting site management. Next. Okay, Melgata's first. I just put in this plan to give you an idea of how big the site is and why what you're going to see doesn't necessarily look like a whole lot because it's covering quite a bit of distance. The labels at the north are the Amun Temple, and then it stretches all the way down to the dotted line out in the desert, for which we were really unable to do much to protect it. There's a quarry on top of it. The most important part of this is we started in 2008, our first season, because the Met had worked there between 1910 and 1920, and Ray had pointed out that the site had problems, and perhaps we might want to come back and take a look. So Dorothea sent me out for a season. Next. And when we did our survey, we came across the fact that the site was really under attack from expansion of the settlements along the edge of the floodplain headed into the desert, into the site, and enormous amount of truck traffic. You can see from these pictures the ATVs were running through the site, the trucks were running over the site. The settlement is right up against the base of the large mounds that are along the edge of the Birket Habu. Farming was beginning to expand over the site, and so we wrote up a report, and Zahi, who was the head of the ministry at that time, asked what should be done to protect it. And we said we thought a wall was about the only thing that was going to stop it. And he commissioned a wall, 10 feet high. That was started in 2009 and finished in 2010. It was the result of Mustafa Waziri. He directed it, and it was put in place just before the revolution. And I don't think Malgata would still be there if that wall hadn't been finished. So the SCA really did a major form of site protection. You can see the wall at the bottom and in the distance along the edge of the road. It's 11 kilometers long. It really stretches the whole length, and it brought to the end it ended the fields, it ended a lot of the truck traffic. He wasn't successful in the whole stretch because there were several really big houses belonging to very wealthy people that he could not block, and the villages wanted a couple of entrances for trucks, which were positioned so that they really weren't running over the site. Next. To the same end of traffic driving over various parts of the site, we responded to requests from the SCA for fencing. So we put up barbed wire over several kilometers of fence from the Amun Temple all the way down around the corner to the Dare, and then on the other side where the West Villas are, and down along towards the South Village, and then surrounding the King's Palace. Now, in the lower right-hand side, you can see people weren't always happy with us. We had started the fence, we had the posts up, we came back the next day and they had all been ripped out. We put them back and they remained. But people were angry about the big wall. And there really was not, unfortunately, any way of maintaining a positive relationship between the people in the villages nearby and the site and the SCA. Next. One of the relentless problems at Malgata, and I'm sure it's still a relentless problem, and we never were able to end it, or at least get them to land way out in the desert, and that's the balloons. They keep landing in the site, and it's, while we're there, we're able to convince people sometimes to stay farther out. But I'm sure when we go, they just go right back to landing in the South Village. You can see the big one is coming down in the temple of the Amun Temple. And it's not so much the landing of the balloons as it is the big trucks that come in to pick up the balloons and take them out that just chew up the surface of the site. We did our best, but I was never very successful at that. Next. One of the big problems, there are two problems here that have to do with expanding population. Malgata was being used as a garbage dump. It's right next to settlements. It has some doorways and a wall, and it's just really convenient. And there was, the breakdown of Borna also led to dumping in the desert, which I think encouraged people. So we cleaned the site of garbage every year. We also cleaned the site of camel thorn, which grew like crazy. And as I'm sure you all know, it just explodes mud brick. And since the mud brick of Malgata, because it's a settlement, it's a festival city, but it's not a temple or a tomb, there's not much left. The expeditions that dug there, including the Met, dug, exposed, especially the palace, and then just left it uncovered. And it was down to almost nothing from walls that were that high. Next. And before I get into that, we did build a guardhouse that was requested by the guards and put in big lights over a lot of the site in order to help protect it at night. Next. So in the upper left is what Malgata looked like when we started. And then you can see the various stages that were put in place by Tony Crosby, who is a mud brick conservator, to try and protect what's left of the ancient brick. You can easily tell the difference between the two. We did not reconstruct or cover anything that wasn't there. So where we had the big enclosure walls, it would be covered, and where we hit a missing area, it would be stepped down and stopped, and then picked up again where there was in situ brick. The bricks are all stamped with GEM, Joint Expedition of Malgata, so they can be easily recognized. And at the bottom, you can see we did about 2/3 of the King's Palace has been now protected, drawn and recorded, all of that, of course. Next. We did uncover several sections of wall that had painted mud brick still in situ. It's very low down. After consulting conservators, we decided the best thing to do was to build a modern mud brick wall about 6 inches away from the decoration and fill it with very, very fine mud that had been sieved. And then on the top of that, once everything is covered above the decoration, to put down stones, because it can't be moved. If you leave it exposed, it's just going to come down. No one came up with a better solution. If there is it was consolidated, of course, as best as possible. But it's painted mud plaster on mud brick walls, exposed to the elements. It's a real problem. Next. Along with that is, as we were cleaning to record and to preserve, we came across lots of piles of little painted mud brick fragments, mud plaster fragments, mostly left by earlier archaeological excavations, neatly piled in corners and covered over with dirt. And it became a big question as to what to do with hundreds of these little pieces of fragments that couldn't be put back together again. One archaeologist wanted them to go into the Carter magazine. The SCA said that wasn't possible. The conservator said that it would just dry out and disintegrate, and that seemed logical to me. So what we ended up doing was a huge pit, way down, but above water table. It was completely dry, laying them down, covering them with this fine mud, and then meters of sand. So we know where they are, but they're hidden from you and really not able to get to. And perhaps they'll last that way until somebody has a better idea of how to protect them. Next. The sites that we worked at, like the North Village, where the walls were 1 brick thick, could not be covered, so they are just reburied in clean sand to protect them after they were drawn. And at the bottom, we came across an in situ section of collapsed palace roof, which we did not have the capability of excavating, and it was going to take a lot of planning. So the conservator, Hiroko Korea, said, we're going to cover it this way, we'll build a wall around it, fill it with clean sand, and put bricks to keep the sand in place until we can propose a way of recording what is full of wood and mud and organics and who knows what's underneath. It's a very complex task. Next. And the last thing we have done, probably not so successfully, is temporary signage, which we tried, and I'm sure is probably not there now. And then Peter Lacavara, who was in charge of the palace for many years, wanted to put back in place 2 of the mud plaster paintings, one from the Met and one from Cairo, so that visitors, which was a discussion we were hoping to get, would actually see what the decoration looked like, since none of it is visible. And the SCA was very supportive of this. We put the 2 pieces back and came back to the site the next day, and they were both under cardboard. We took the cardboard away, and the next day they were back under cardboard again. So they're there to be shown if you come to the site, but they are not easily visible because the guards were afraid that they would fade. They won't, because they're acrylics. We tested all of that, but they're there. Next. So I'm going to quickly go through what's happened at Dashur, since I see we're running out of time. Dashur, of course, is the big pyramid site of Senwosret III. Next. And they are trying to store the blocks that they find very safely, reconstruct what they can, and carefully preserve respectfully the human remains that they find, because there's a huge Roman cemetery at the base of the pyramid. And you can see the reconstruction of the enclosure wall of Senwosret III. The lower part of the pyramid has been stabilized with modern mud brick. Next. There's another view of the stabilization. All of that sloping wall is modern mud brick, and that's the outline of the, I believe, the pyramid temple that is in front. Next. They have also outlined the mastabas of several big mastabas. You can see Nebitz, which is got an outline and filled with mud brick, and Sobek Emhat. Next. And other parts of mastabas like Nabit and Khnhotep have been reconstructed from fragments that were scattered inside a new structure that was hope will someday be a museum, a place you can come visit. But they're beautiful reliefs, and they were just all over the place. And they've done a wonderful job reconstructing them. Next. We also built a massive storeroom at the request of the SCA, which you see here. This is where all of the relief fragments are housed. Next. Inside, in shelving, open storage, all organized by the area they come from and the type of decoration. And there's plenty of room to study. And the inspectors have a place there as well. Next. They have also built an outside storage for reliefs as well, and they have reconstructed Jacques de Morgan's house, which is where the human remains are now housed. And there are a lot of human remains with a lot of textiles, which have been very carefully preserved by textile conservators from the Met. Next. I made it.
This is it.
A little bit.
Thanks.
Pretty fast.
Thank you very much, Diana. Amazing. If you can pass it to Martin, please. Thank you. Still remaining in Egypt for now.
Yeah, hello. Good evening, everybody. I try myself.
All right.
Jumping down to the south in Elephantine. We take a look. Doesn't work. Oh, yes. So Elephantine is, of course, under investigation by the German Archaeological Institute in cooperation with the Swiss Institute in Cairo since 1969. And what we see here in the middle image is like just highlighting other projects which are there, also been served from Elephantine as the base, and two projects here done by the German Archaeological Institute are also within context of site management, which is the historic Islamic necropolis, the so-called Fatimid cemetery in Aswan, and the Anbar Hadra, which is going on at the moment as being a study and heritage conservation project. And if we take a look to Elephantine, as said, excavation started since 1969, and it is a very complex site itself. It is different than the examples we have seen before, which are also complex on their own, but here we face a difference in complexity. What we'll see later on. In 1979, the site was put under protection by the UNESCO as being assigned as a World Heritage Site, together with other places. In Aswan, the two mentioned Fatimid Cemetery and the Coptic monastery ruin on the western bank of the River Nile, as well as the tombs of the Kuba del Hawa and the quarry with the unfinished obelisk. This is the cluster of World Heritage Sites in Aswan, where Elephantine is again at its center. If we take a look now to the site from a different perspective, facing now south, there we can see a bit of the complexity of this site, where we have this enormous settlement mound, which was growing from human activities and occupation for a time of 4,000 years, ending in the 10th century Islamic Middle Ages somewhere. We also can see the temple of Khnum and the reconstructed temples of Satet in different time stages. So what we can see here in this picture is one level, because we already had a site management applied here, which was done under the direction of Werner Kaiser, who was directing the excavations, but also always was very fond of making the site accessible to the public and also to inform about the works. So what we have is an archaeological site with an very deep occupation period. We have a former site management. We have reconstructions which have been done in the past. And what we can see in the bottom of the picture left are two site museums which are showing either finds and objects from the area of Aswan, which is the Aswan Museum, Elephantine, the old building on the left, and then the new building, which was also inaugurated in 1998, which is showing objects from the German-Swiss excavations here done. Somewhere in the 1990s or so, the site was surrounded by a fence, what we have also seen before. Before it was totally accessible from all sides, and then with the inauguration of the site management in 1998, it was enclosed by a fence. There was a ticket office installed, a pathway was developed, a visitor's path. A guidebook was printed in English and Arabic versions addressing a certain kind of visitor. Werner Kaiser, when he did it, was more aware about like people who are well educated already, coming from abroad of Egypt in the search of antiquities. It is very rich and very, very well written, and we put it now like in temporary signage there, free accessible via QR codes for everybody who's coming there until we put on our new signage. As since 1998, the research went on. We have another layer on top of everything in Elephantine. It's an active excavation site. At the moment, we are excavating, just this as a little side note, in the inside of the early dynastic fortress, so-called fortress, where we want to learn more about like the early urban history of Elephantine, because we know from previous excavation that the town grew from this area. So we have here a multi-layered site of an ancient town. What we can see here in these two plans, where we on the left-hand side have like an age mapping of the as-built structures. This was the first thing we did when we started in 2020, to draw up an as-built plan, which did not exist. We had like reconstruction plans showing the stages of the expansion of the town from Old Kingdom to the Ptolemaic period. So we wanted to know what is there overground as built, and this is what we did just before we had to stop in March 2020. And then when coming back in 2021, in autumn, we were facing another struggle, which was a heavy rain, which we will see later on again. So we have here different things. We have like a very complex overground structure, and we have different materialities. All this is bringing in enrichment to like challenging different points of when it comes to conservation methods. Number one is, of course, the mud brick, whereas the settlement mound, up to 20-meter high, is mainly been done in mud brick structures. And then we have different buildings. We can see the orange dot in the top of the right picture, which is like the pyramid, which is there, done in local granite, and also other stone buildings, such as the temple buildings, for instance. And this mix of materials is just like illustrated by the picture in the center of this slide. So what we also did is then to understand the site management pathway of Werner Kaiser and the signatures he did. So he selected certain points of particular interest he wanted to present to the visitors, both physically by doing reconstructions, but also by bringing them into this guidebook. And we adopted that idea, and we built on that thematic areas. We had heard today already about like how to organize museum exhibitions and so on. We decided here also to go on a thematic area, organized areas in order to break up this complexity of the site. So we have like here grayish in the center, the settlement mound, where people were living, housing, economic production, and so on was going on. We have here highlighted in green, this is the religious areas with the centers of the Temple of Satet and the Temple of Khnum. And there we took Kaiser's circuit and restructured it. This is what we can see on the right-hand side, in order to put these thematic points of particular interest into a better circulation for each visitor. When we come to visitors in Elefantina, we have not so many. 2019, it was roughly 2,900 visitors a year. After COVID, now this is coming back. The main points of interest for the groups in Aswan is Philae Temple, of course, the High Dam, and then the quarry with the obelisk. These are the three main spots. So we are dealing mostly with individual tourists or even groups of students and pupils. So what we did then was doing two things. First, we had to rework on the circulation. What we see here on the left-hand picture is like the staircase in the top, where we have the height difference of the reconstruction area, which is a backfill. This is what we call the open air museum with the Temple of Satet reconstructed. And now people can descend down into this former north-south street, which we can trace down from the Old Kingdom till to the very uppermost layers of late antiquity was in use for an enormous period of time. So people now have a physical experience by descending from what is reconstructed into something which is more authentic. Here, of course, is also the reconstruction of the Hekaib sanctuary, integrated as being a crucial part of the circuit. On the right-hand side, we see that we Also, we're thinking about the fencing, the areas people should be able to access and those who are not able to access. This is also on a site like Elefantine, where we have mud bricks which are threatened by human and also animal factors. Of course, the animals we will not prevent by our fencing, but the barriers, the visual barriers, they're more or less visual than physical barriers, are preventing, hopefully, tourists and visitors not to enter these parts. And I'm very glad that on the big picture on the right, we almost don't see our new fencing. On the left side of the picture is the old fencing system. This is also done in a backfilled area south of the Temple of Khnum, where a reconstruction of an Amenhotep III gate is done. The new fencing is blending in with the surroundings. It's very important to us. We did a lot of sampling, materials, colors, and so on, that we connect like everything what we add inside with the surrounding. We check that. We cannot work with very soft materials. They are like wood, organics, also ropes. They will deteriorate very fast, also been attacked by termites and other animals. So we stay in very let's say harsh materials like metal turn out to be the best option. And this goes then also for our panel and signature system. As mentioned before, we have thematic areas, but we still have within the thematic areas, we have single monuments. So we have a two-level signature system. What we also then checked on site by testing, long-term testing, colors, materials, and so on. We have a very high UV impact here in the south of Egypt. This is bringing in problems when it comes to printed materials, for instance. So number one is our thematic area panel, where we will have, yes, here we see like the hierarchy of the signature system and the sampling process, where we choose colors, materials, and so on. Again, on the middle top picture, we found a color then which is blending in within the context, from close, also from far away, that we do it in a very, let's say, respectful way with the heritage site itself. If we take a closer look to the panels themselves, then we have here on the left-hand side a thematic panel, a front side and a back side, where we have the introduction to each thematic area. This is now the panel for the Temple of Satet. The visitors, when they come, they don't understand that this temple is what is striking, unique, like a provincial temple, which we can trace back to prehistoric times, and then rebuild over and over again at the very same spot till the Ptolemaic period. That all these reconstructions have been found in the foundations of the Ptolemaic temple building, and they were standing in the very same spot of this rock formation, which is the origin of the cult of Satet there. So we show that now in illustrations on site, which is there. The architectural development, also the cult development and so on, is explained bilingual, Arabic and English. Then each reconstruction or each feature which is in that thematic area is also explained by a single panel in depth. So we have this combined signage system. Here's now like this monument panel explained. We choose a band panel design in order that people can relate what they see on the panel to see what they have in front of them. Here's a reconstruction of the Satet temple in Roman and Ptolemaic times. It means also we're doing actively research and producing new proposals on reconstruction which have not been shown before in publications. So we are doing all our site management in terms also research-based. This goes for the explanation panels, but this also goes for our physical consolidation and conservation measures, where we have here and to deal with the mud bricks, which suffer, of course, as known, a lot from weather condition, erosion, human and animal activities, and so forth. And we had already integrated in the open air museum the completion of certain buildings and plans of these buildings in mud brick. We now did like an overall maintenance of that, because this is a regular maintenance is needed. It is not the way that we can do one thing and then we don't have to do anything again in the future. We need a regular maintenance of this material, and this is what we now did 25 years after the last roundup, patching up brick walls, also restoring, repairing the cappings of what was already there, and we did a lot of backfilling of excavation trenches which have been studied, which is very much important, because we saw that during the rain also that caused damage in the archaeological heritage. What we do also is like the research-based material analysis. We are analyzing mud bricks from the site in the excavation reports and publications. We can also read like mud bricks are good or either bad. What does it mean? That they came over to our days and still surviving makes a good mud brick. But we want to know what is a good mud brick, which condition. And we recast them according to our findings. And we apply it also to reconstructions. The rain, as mentioned before, in order to improve the material we are using to be more resilient towards water impact. As we know, climate change will also bring in problems in this case. Yes, and just because it's so nice, the panel for the Heka Sanctuary, and that's it with the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Thank you. Now, after having seen these examples from site management of archaeological sites in Egypt, what is the situation of site management in Italy? Massimo, please.
Thank you. So I will switch also from English to Italian and from Egypt to the archaeological site in Italy.
Please.
So I hope, I'm sure you can understand also my Italian. Allora, funziona.
Sì.
Prendersi cura il tema che mi è stato dato era prendersi cura di un sito archeologico. Che cosa vuol dire? Per me vuol dire innanzitutto 3 parole chiave. Proteggere, che vuol dire in un sito archeologico sappiamo bene le rovine sono destinate a deteriorarsi, il patrimonio si deteriora con l'avanzamento, appunto l'avanzamento del degrado è incessante, quindi dobbiamo porre in qualche modo freno all'azione degenerativa costante sui materiali da costruzione. Quindi questo è la prima parola chiave, che vuol dire quindi applicare al sito archeologico un progetto sistematico di conservazione programmata, che vuol dire, poi approfondirò brevemente, che vuol dire studio, prevenzione, manutenzione, restauro. L'altra parola chiave è raccontare. Raccontare significa quello che abbiamo discusso molto in questa giornata, trovare linguaggi adeguati e sempre rinnovati e adeguati alle società sempre più complesse che visitano i nostri luoghi archeologici, e questo lo possiamo fare anche utilizzando le nuove tecnologie, utilizzando tutto quello che la nostra società contemporanea ci permette di utilizzare. Quindi nuovi racconti, nuovi linguaggi che devono essere declinati all'insegna dell'accessibilità, ed è questo un tema caro al Ministero della Cultura, che negli ultimi anni ha elaborato più piani di accessibilità, e in questi anni, proprio ultimi 2 anni, è impegnato in un enorme progetto di accessibilità grazie a un finanziamento PNRR, 300 milioni proprio per i luoghi della cultura, per intervenire sull'accessibilità, non solo ovviamente abbattimento delle barriere architettoniche, ma barriere soprattutto cognitive e sensoriali, che vuol dire ripensare gli allestimenti di musei, che è quello che si sta cercando di fare. L'altra parola chiave è curare le relazioni. Curare le relazioni significa interloquire con le comunità locali che hanno instaurato con il sito spesso un legame affettivo tramandato attraverso generazioni, vuol dire dialogare con i pubblici, con gli stakeholder, quindi un museo aperto che sia un luogo di incontro e di riflessione e anche di scambio reciproco fra pubblici e curatori. Bisogna ovviamente partire da un piano di gestione, qui dico ovviamente alcune cose banali che tutti noi che lavoriamo nei luoghi archeologici o nei musei sappiamo, ma è importante, come dire, ribadirlo per sottolineare quanto importante sia un approccio strategico e un approccio sistemico ai nostri luoghi. Quindi un piano strategico vuol dire, un piano di gestione vuol dire individuare le strategie necessarie alla tutela, alla conservazione e alla valorizzazione del patrimonio, ovviamente per preservare oggi e offrire oggi, aprire ai pubblici oggi, ma anche per preservarlo per le generazioni future. Quindi una enorme responsabilità che deve essere declinata attraverso un approccio consapevole e sistemico, che significa, qui è un po' semplificato, un quadro conoscitivo che è fondamentale. Spesso i nostri musei non hanno neanche un piano della conoscenza, che vuol dire i rilievi complessivi del sito archeologico. Quando io sono arrivato a Pompei nel 2014, la prima cosa di cui mi sono accorto è che la pianta, il rilievo a disposizione era un rilievo in scala 1 a 500, assolutamente inadeguato per i progetti di restauro, per i progetti di manutenzione. Quindi una delle prime attività è stato un enorme piano della conoscenza, una documentazione di tutto l'esistente, partendo da una pianta a scala 1,50, che è diventata poi la base per, per intervenire poi sul sito in maniera consapevole. E questo ha significato anche creare un archivio informatico dove, a proposito di digitalizzazione, dove tutto questo patrimonio di conoscenze, a partire dalla pianta, ma da tutta la documentazione, muro per muro, soglia, elementi costruttivi di ogni edificio, confluisse. E questo è stato quindi un primo sforzo enorme. Quindi il quadro conoscitivo è fondamentale e non è banale, perché, ripeto, pochissimi musei oggi in Italia possono dire di avere un quadro conoscitivo completo, spesso si hanno ancora rilievi analogici, quindi c'è ancora moltissimo da fare in questo senso. Quadro conoscitivo, si passa a un quadro strategico, che vuol dire appunto l'approccio in maniera sistematica al progetto culturale che si vuole avviare nell'area archeologica, che è anche un progetto di sviluppo, che si declina poi attraverso un quadro programmatico di gruppi di interventi che devono essere appunto declinati in base al budget, in base anche alle priorità che il sito richiede. Gestire un sito archeologico, ovviamente sapete bene, in Italia con la riforma del 2014, la riforma Franceschini, si è diviso in maniera netta la tutela dalla valorizzazione. La tutela ha una sua direzione generale, la valorizzazione un'altra, appunto direzione generale musei, che rappresento, e questo non vuol dire che chi si occupa di valorizzazione non si occupa di tutela, perché credo che siamo tutti consapevoli che per valorizzare un sito devi partire necessariamente dalla conoscenza e da programmi seri di conservazione. Su questo vorrei tornare in maniera, come dire, più dettagliata. E questo ovviamente sempre nel gestire il sito archeologico, una consapevolezza di chi ci lavora all'interno, e però che si nutre del dialogo con le comunità, innanzitutto le comunità di prossimità, ma poi tutti i pubblici che dobbiamo, come dire, accogliere in maniera sempre più ampia. Per questo parlo di pubblici e non di pubblico, perché siamo molto consapevoli che nelle nostre società complesse i pubblici sono diversi per formazione, per preparazione, per età, per interessi, eccetera, eccetera. Dunque, ovviamente ogni area archeologica poi non è così, come dire, come la natura lo crea o come viene fuori da uno scavo. È il frutto di un intervento dell'uomo, è un frutto di un intervento che ovviamente è sempre selettivo. Non puoi conservare tutto, rendere visibile tutto, quindi ci sono delle scelte che sono una grande responsabilità del curatore, ed è per questo che è importante che nei team e nei gruppi di lavoro, chi lavora nei musei, siano sempre più interdisciplinari e che abbiano occhi diversi di approccio. Per cui con l'amico Christian diciamo sempre che nei musei non ci devono essere solo archeologi, storici dell'arte o architetti, ma ci devono essere sociologi, ci devono essere filosofi, ci devono essere architetti del paesaggio, cioè team pluridisciplinari è l'unica maniera per affrontare la complessità di cui ormai siamo consapevoli. Purtroppo nel nostro ministero ci sono ancora queste griglie un po' ottocentesche di cooptazione del personale, per cui ci sono concorsi per storici dell'arte, per architetti, per archeologi. Adesso è iniziato, si coglie un'apertura, in quanto per esempio c'è un concorso, dovrebbe partire presto, o è partito già, per le alte professionalità, che comprende anche esperti in scienze dure e quindi tutto dai chimici ai fisici, oltre che ovviamente gli ingegneri eccetera, però bisogna fare ancora molto molto di più. Quindi che dicevo proprio sulla sistemazione delle aree archeologiche che non sono così scontate, vorrei presentare alcuni casi dove non bisogna dimenticare che non è solo il sito all'interno del parco archeologico, ma il paesaggio in cui questo è inserito, che va ovviamente compreso e tutelato e preservato, perché ci sono siti incredibili come Villa Adriana per esempio o Sepino, che hanno ancora preservato un paesaggio intorno assolutamente quasi intatto, e questa è una responsabilità unica. Pensate anche Pestum, cioè l'approccio deve essere sistemico anche nell'interesse e nell'attenzione a quello che circonda il parco. Per questo io ho sempre voluto che i parchi archeologici, anche dopo la riforma, non fossero delimitati all'interno delle recinzioni del parco, ma che fosse di responsabilità del direttore di quel parco anche un'area, una sorta di buffer zone.
Sì, più ampia.
Sì. Più ampia, proprio per cercare di avere un approccio univoco alla conservazione dei paesaggi. E poi ovviamente gli scavi archeologici sono frutti, come dire, di scavi del passato, scelte del passato. Pensate agli scavi di Ostia e alle ricostruzioni degli scavi di Ostia. Questo è un tema che è stato affrontato anche dai colleghi ed è un tema fondamentale. Cioè, anche qui, quanto si deve ricostruire? È lecito ancora ricostruire? Ultimamente c'è un po' una tendenza timida nell'approccio ricostruttivo, però io vorrei ricordare che sia la carta del restauro di Firenze del 72, ma già quella di Venezia del 64, non erano così, come dire, rigide. Nella carta di Venezia c'è scritto che c'è praticamente la conservazione, lo scopo del restauro è conservare e rivelare. Che interessante. E poi nella carta di Firenze invece trasmettere al futuro e facilitare la lettura. Allora il restauro non è solo conservazione, ma deve essere anche un atto critico che consente di leggere l'opera meglio di prima. Per esempio, basta vedere il caso di Ostia. L'architettura domestica delle grandi insole, blocchi di insole, non sarebbe assolutamente chiara né agli studiosi né ai pubblici se fosse rimasta in questo stato. No?
Giusto.
Invece, se la ricostruzione è frutto di una conoscenza, è frutto di un approccio consapevole, io non sarei così timido. Ovviamente è una responsabilità grave. Di recente sono state fatte ricostruzioni anche a Roma, anche in aree pubbliche importanti, discutibili devo dire, ma questo poi è la responsabilità, e anche per questo ci vogliono team interdisciplinari e ci vuole, come dire, un lavoro di equipe dove si coinvolgono università, si coinvolgono specialisti, non si fa in maniera entropica all'interno solo del proprio ufficio. Questo è fondamentale. Ricordo quando partirono i restauri dell'Acropoli negli anni '80, ci fu un questionario a tutti gli accademici proprio per individuare quale doveva essere la linea, e devo dire, anche lì a volte con qualche esagerazione, però si è cercato di ricostruire porzioni di muro laddove si potevano come dire, mettere in situ, rimettere in edificio blocchi che erano stati recuperati o pezzi che erano stati recuperati dispersi sulla superficie dell'Acropoli. Tra l'altro con tutto il problema anche della visibilità e del restauro, che è un tema fondamentale e che è un altro di quei temi su cui ovviamente bisogna riflettere, e sapete anche su questo, scusate, ecco, questo è un altro caso di ricostruzione, la ricostruzione della Porta Boiana a Sepino, che ci permette di capire non solo come sono anche le altre porte, ma anche di capire bene questo standard urbano di età augustea che trasforma tutte le città e le fa diventare dei poli di urbanitas anche in piena campagna. Qui ci passavano le pecore, però doveva esserci ovviamente un arco quasi un arco di trionfo. E poi dico, per quanto riguarda ovviamente i materiali aggiunti, c'è sempre un tema, la lacuna. C'è stato un convegno fatto di recente nel Parco Archeologico di Ostia su come trattare la lacuna. È stato molto interessante perché, visto da tanti approcci diversi, è quello che è chiaro che non c'è una ricetta. E anche qui è una responsabilità seria, e io mi atterrei ancora a quanto diceva De Angelis Dossà, di preferire soluzioni colte che consentono di riconoscere i restauri da vicino, con materiali antichi o moderni o con materiali antichi. In ogni caso, ovviamente spesso, come fece già Maiuri a Pompei, distinguere il nuovo dall'antico attraverso delle linee di demarcazione. Ma ovviamente potremmo andare molto avanti qui con materiali moderni, che però, il foro di Traiano sappiamo, che però rendono leggibile la tessitura di laterizio, e qui ovviamente un altro caso sempre di Ostia. Chiudo dicendo ovviamente quello che è fondamentale è portare avanti nei parchi archeologici un sistema di manutenzione, un programma sistematico di manutenzione programmata. Quello che è stato fatto a Pompei a partire dal 2015, dove si è creato un gruppo di circa 50 persone, operai specializzati, restauratori, archeologo, architetto, ingegneri, che creavano delle squadre di ispezione, documentazione, ispezione sistematica, diagnosi, intervento e poi la cosa più interessante è informatizzazione di tutti i dati. Con delle schede, quindi faccio vedere un po' di questa terapia che si è individuato, con delle schede informatizzate dove non solo si registrano lo stato dell'arte prima dell'intervento, lo stato dopo l'intervento, ma anche si individua quanto tempo ci vuole per ripetere l'operazione, sia come energie uomo e ore, ma anche la priorità degli interventi, cioè dopo quanto tempo va ripetuto e qual è la priorità fra i vari siti individuati da mettere e queste sono le schede appunto che sono state anche qui come dire create e sono confluite in un archivio informatico che permette di approcciarsi consapevolmente al tema, laddove precedentemente non c'era nessuna documentazione dei restauri e quindi solo attraverso analisi delle malte si poteva capire se erano restauri antichi o restauri contemporanei, ma non vi annoio ulteriormente.
No, thank you very much, grazie mille. So the thing is, I have to say thank you very much. Grazie mille. Thank you for having shared all these experiences. I will let you go just 1 minute of wrapping up. The thing is, what is clear here is that every site is a specific case. All right, we all agree about that. The thing is, the key to make it, I would say, thorough and have something consistent is to have a set of methods, methodologies, techniques that can be applied. And depending on the site where we are working, we can apply A, B, D, F, or G, Z. So yes, and I think it's the key also is to have the philosophy behind it. And as you described it very well, absolutely thoroughly and outstandingly, once you understood what you want to do, then you know the method to use. What Ray was detailing at the beginning, I don't want to restore it. It breaks my heart to restore it. I'd like to dismantle it, to restore more. These are all choices we're facing, exactly. But then the key is what we want to implement. What's the narrative? What's the end? It's for the preservation. And then we have then to choose. And choice will always be the key to what we do and what will be done for the future generations. Well, thank you very much. Thank you all, and thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.